admitting people?
We've got 28 people, 35. You mean I have to tell you when you're going to be the host, or you want to just do it now?
I can start admitting people now. Yeah.
Sure, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think maybe we'll get started then. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our National Online Reading Club. We're celebrating our September issue. My name is Alanna Mitchell, and I'm the features editor at Broadview. Working behind the scenes to help me out tonight is Aisha Habib, who is Broadview's wonderful associate editor. We're so glad that you've taken the time this evening to be with us. We're going to be here for about an hour. I am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, the original owners and custodians of this land. Today, Toronto is home to many, including a diverse urban Indigenous community of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. We'd love to know where you're from. Please say hello from your hometown in the chat space if you feel like it. And if you're part of a faith community and you want to add that as well, please feel free to do that. Also, if you want to add your own land acknowledgement from wherever you are, I invite you to share that as well. It's great for us to get to know each other a little bit. And Aisha will show you how to do that in the chat. A few housekeeping notes before we start. I want you to know that we're recording this session so that we can share the event with others. And if you feel uncomfortable with your thumbnail video appearing on this recording, please turn off your video now. And also please mute your audio. We may actually mute that for you if you don't do it. Please do turn on the chat function. Just hover your cursor over the bottom where it says cursor. The chat button will appear and you just have to click on it. And I also recommend that you use the speaker view rather than the gallery view. There's a spot to change that right up in the top corner of your screen. This evening, we are going to hear from three amazing people. We're going to hear from Judy Peterson, Alison Motluk, and from Michelle Harder, each of whom is featured in our September issue. This is the one. And at the end of the hour, we have a special surprise. Our publisher, Jocelyn Bell, will reveal right here tonight, live for the first time, the winner of our Best Christmas Sermon Ever contest and the two runners up. And we've invited all three of the judges who chose the winner to be here tonight so they can enjoy the big reveal. They are Wing Yi Wong of Emmanuel College, Reverend Ross Bartlett of Atlantic School of Theology, and Reverend Joni Sankin of the Vancouver School of Theology. And each of these is an esteemed homiletician, which means that they understand how to give sermons. And so this is going to be really a fun night. One final note before we begin. After each speaker has told us a little bit about themselves and their stories, we're going to have time to ask questions. And Aisha will post our instructions on how to ask questions in the chat space. I have a few questions ready just in case, but really this is your time. So please get your questions ready. We really, really want to hear from you. So if you look in the chat, you should be able to see how to do this. There are two ways to ask a question. The first is just type "I have a question" into the chat, and I'll call on you as time allows. Then switch on your audio and just ask your question. Or you can just type it into the chat and I'll ask the question for you. So with no further ado, let's get started. Judy, Peterson is one of our, is the subject. I want to show you this is the piece about Judy in our magazine. 31 years ago, Judy Peterson's daughter, Lindsay Nichols, vanished without a trace. She was 14. Judy has been trying to find her ever since, for nearly half of her life. As Judy did that, she realized that there was no national data bank to match the DNA of missing people with unidentified human remains. And so she spent 15 years lobbying to get one set up. Mary Baxter wrote that gorgeous profile of Judy in our September issue, and I urge you to savor it if you haven't already. And so Judy, over to you for a few minutes to let us know where you are.
Thanks, Alanna. Yes, my 14-year-old daughter, Lindsay Jill Nichols, vanished August the 2nd, 1993. And so for 3 decades, I've been on an emotional roller coaster. So in the summer of 92, Lindsay was only 13. She was struggling in school. She had a group of friends we were really concerned about. And my then husband got offered a transfer to the Comox Valley, which was a smaller center. And we thought, great, fresh start, get away from the friends. And ironically, we thought it would be a safer place for her. Of course, as any teenager would be, she was furious because she was moving away from her friends. But once we got there, you know, she seemed to be settling in. She joined Air Cadets. We went skiing every weekend that winter, but by spring, things started to go south again. School was really a problem, and at home as well. And she ran away and went back to the Lower Mainland. When she came back to the Comox Valley, I thought things were improving, but 10 days later, she vanished. I reported her missing to the RCMP, but with her history of running away, it complicated the investigation from the very beginning, I believe. So she was last seen walking down a rural road, and we believe that she was hitchhiking. I was sure she hadn't run away because all of her special things were still in her room, and she hadn't left me a note as she had done before. And I was frantic. So I created my own missing posters. I went around town with my roll of Scotch tape and tearfully asked, you know, store owners if I could hang them up. And then about 6 weeks later, I found out about the Missing Children Society of Canada. And when they took on the case, I was so relieved to have some support, but I was also terrified because it meant that, you know, they were the experts and they were worried about her as well. So you have to remember, this was a time before cell phones. We were relying on landlines and paper posters. It's hard to even imagine how long ago it was. But the Missing Children, you know, put up posters all over the province. They sent an investigator out, and it was absolutely wonderful. But after about 7 years of searching, I thought it's time to submit her DNA. So I asked the RCMP, you know, I felt like I was sort of giving up, but I knew that it was the next step. And the RCMP explained to me that in Canada, there isn't a missing person DNA data bank. And I was horrified. I just said, oh my God, what if she's sitting in a coroner's office all this time? So this was a whole other layer of frustration and anxiety. And I started lobbying the federal government for a change in the legislation. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out along the way. And I soon learned that phone calls and letters were not enough. I needed to get myself in front of the right people. And it was hard. And then not only finding the right people, but then they would change. The government changed, I think, 4 times or 5 times while I was lobbying. And then the portfolios would change, and then their titles would change. And it was kind of like whack-a-mole. It was frustration beyond belief. But 18 years later, the legislation passed. And finally, in Canada, the National DNA Data Bank would accept DNA profiles from missing persons and found human remains, and they could be matched. when they named the legislation Lindsay's Law, it was overwhelming. I just couldn't believe that it had become finally a reality. And Lindsay's DNA was the first profile to be loaded. So we've done dozens of articles, national magazines, national news, local news, newspapers, and media events for anniversaries. And often I would think, if only I could do enough coverage of media, or if only I could say just the right thing to reach the right people, you know, somebody would come forward. And there have been hundreds of tips on Lindsay's file. Some of them are hopeful, where, you know, I think they saw her, and other ones have been horrific, where they lead to like a forensic dig. It's just been unbelievably, the unknowing has been so difficult. And so many times I've thought, okay, this is it. This is how I'm going to find out. And then it leads to another dead end. So I've lived on this roller coaster of emotions. And my biggest fear now is that I will never know. I will never know maybe what happened to Lindsay. And I think it's when I tell people my story, they often say, you know, I can't even imagine. And I often say back, I can't even imagine either. I still can't believe that this has happened to Lindsay or our family. And that's my story, Alanna.
Wow, it's just, it's so profound. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it hard to keep telling it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It is.
I can see that in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have questions, now's the time to ask them. I wanted to ask you though, in the meantime, please, you know, put your questions in the chat if you want to. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, but I've heard that you're writing a manuscript, and I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I don't know, probably 20 years ago, I read a book called Writing as a Way of Healing. And so then if something sort of would trigger me, I would, you know, make some notes, and I've probably got about 6 journals with 10 pages each. And so for whatever reason, I felt that need to gather all the stories, even if it's, you know, I've got boxes of newspaper articles and hundreds of emails, even if just to put them together for my younger daughter, Kim. And so I am writing now, and I've put together a draft and working with an editor, but you know, it's difficult because I've never written a book before. So, but it's cathartic. I feel so good to get all the stories out of my head and onto paper. And some of them I totally had forgotten. So it's been a really great experience so far.
Do you have a publisher already?
No,
Not yet.
no. If you know of any.
We're all no to the universe.
Yeah.
Here's a book looking for a publisher.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Do you know how many people have been helped? I mean, because you obviously set this up not just for Lindsay, but for Canadians as a whole.
Yeah. From what I understand, on the annual report, there's been 90 matches. 67 of them are, so now they know the name of the person and everything. And the other 23 are actually matched into the crime scene index, which was a big part of my lobby. I was afraid they weren't going to search into the crime scene index. And it's obviously very successful because now they have an investigative lead. Because my contention was that Lindsay's DNA could be at a crime scene somewhere. And then we would at least know, you know, she was in somebody's basement, her blood or what, you know, like that sort of crime lead. They've matched 23 DNA profiles to crime scenes.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Again, if you have questions in the audience, please let us know. Here's one. What keeps you going? Is the question. It's this is from Jocelyn.
I have no idea, but what I found was I could only go so long without doing something, whatever it was, you know, harassing the policeman, or, you know, like contacting them and say, hey, I need an update, or like I would just build up, I don't know if it was anxiety or whatever, stuffing envelopes or talking to politicians. It just made me feel better. So I did it And, you know, she's my daughter. I can't stop.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It feels like there's some, you know, sort of almost a spiritual fortitude there, not just an anxiety, but that there is some sort of, you know, search for
Yeah.
meaning.
Yeah. What could I do next? And
Yeah.
then I'd think of something and then I would work on it. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Do you, I mean, I have known of you for some years, and I think of you as a hero. I think of you as
Yeah.
great Canadian heroes. And I'm just wondering, do you see that in yourself?
No, that's what I'm trying to say is that, you know, my motivation was to find Lindsay and doing things that I thought might lead to finding her, relieve tension in myself and make me feel better. And, you know, I guess I felt over the way that, she would know how hard I tried.
Of course.
So it was something that came from inside me that made me feel, the steps that I could do made me feel better. So, yeah.
Okay.
And not to say I wasn't proud. I'm incredibly proud of, the matches that have been made. And, yes, for sure.
Mhm. Michelle is asking, what was the greatest turning point for you in all of this journey?
I think that, well, there's been lots of them, but the biggest turning point was, we did a 20th anniversary up in the Comox Valley, and John Duncan came. We invited him pretty much by accident, and Elizabeth May was there, and we both spoke, and John came, and I didn't have a clue who he was. I knew he was an MP, and he got up and said he was going to support us, like in front of 50 people. And when he left, Elizabeth May said to me, you know, oh my God, that's wonderful. And she had to explain to me who he was, what was the party whip. I had no idea. And he actually was the one that set up a meeting between, 3 cabinet ministers. I went to Ottawa and met with them. And then things just went forward very quickly. So for me, that was the biggest turning point. To get myself in front of him was, yeah, it was great. So John was very, very good.
It was the moment everything
Contact.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way. I happen to know that you've actually encountered the mother of another person who went missing and who was found because of the database that you helped to set up. And I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yes, I think it was, the very first match. Her name was Monique, and her son had been missing 7 years. And they phoned her and told her that, you know, they had found his remains. But was so excited that, you're not excited, but so grateful that she actually had an answer, because it, like I said, not knowing is just so painful. And what was interesting is that I found out about her through your article in Maclean's, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, I always knew that I could get the stats. You know, I could contact the RCMP, or I could look on the annual report, and I could watch this, how many matches there were, but it never occurred to me that I would know their name or contact them or know their backstory and how it did. So that was amazing.
Yeah, it was. Do you have contact? Jesh is asking. Oh, I got this. Jesh is asking, do you have any contact with other parents who have lost their family members?
No, not well. Through the Missing Children Society, I have met people. I have gone to a support group for parents whose children have died, and that's been wonderful. I went in the early years, but no, I don't have any regular contact.
Yeah. There's a question here from Chris, but I can't see what the question is. Chris, if you'd like to make yourself known and ask the question.
Sorry, I muted. Sorry. Can I ask the question in person here? Hi, Judy. This is a little bit technical, but I'm wondering about the actual DNA. So one doesn't ordinarily just save the DNA from various family members just in case, correct? So you obviously had something, or and I'm curious about what, I wonder if that ever came up. That, I mean, I don't know, it's a little bit morbid, but should people save something?
I would say yes. You know, they were doing kits at one time for kids. They were taking fingerprints and everything. And, you know, after being involved, I was thinking, what if there's no fingerprints? You know, it's not going to help anybody. You need DNA. And you can get DNA from their hairbrush or their toothbrush, or even you can use from what they call familial DNA. So if I put my DNA in, they would be able to they would say this is a maternal, or it would be close enough that they would be able to find Lindsay. So there is a separate database that family members can put their own DNA in to narrow the search. Yeah. And I did keep something in a Ziploc. I don't know why, but I did.
No. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Judy. That is, I really appreciate your sharing your story yet again to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to go to Alison Motluk. Alison is a freelance journalist who's based in Toronto, and she has written about reproductive technologies for many years and is actually the journalistic expert in Canada in this field. She also publishes a weekly newsletter called Hey Reprotech, which is fascinating. It's really a whole world of depth of knowledge. It's fascinating. And she wrote this cover story, the one here that we have for this month. It's about donor-conceived people finding their roots despite anonymity rules. So Alison, I wonder if you could take it over from now.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So yes, I am a freelance journalist, and most of my work these days is about assisted reproduction, and a fair amount is about donor conception. And so this story is about donor conception, which is when, donor conception and the right to know where you come from. Donor conception is when when a family decides to use sperm or eggs from outside their family, not their own genetics. So you know, an egg donor or a sperm donor. And you use them to create your child. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people now who were conceived that way. And most of them came about during a time when doctors believed the best policy was anonymity. That is, they would, you know, you would go to a family might go to a fertility clinic and use a donor unknown to them. And the doctor might say to them, you know, just pretend this didn't happen, go home, just resume your life, have sex with your husband, pretend that's how it happened, and never tell the child. And many, many people followed that advice. It's not as common these days. However, the documentation is still it still falls to that side. In other words, the medical records that pertain to this person's creation belong to the mother, and therefore they can be destroyed after about 7 years, depends on the province. The birth certificates never make mention of this fact of their creation, the way they were created, that the fact that there might be a third party, a donor of some kind unknown to them. And so it's possible for a person to spend their entire life and not know this fact about themselves. Somebody else obviously knows. They're at least one parent, probably both parents know. But this person could go through their whole life not knowing, or find out at some point when they're not ready for that to find out that this is the case for them. And it's completely legal in Canada to not tell a person that they were conceived using DNA that doesn't belong to the family that's raising them. So for me, the story about donor conception for me started in 2005 when I was at a conference. And I was already writing about it. I was at the time a staff writer for New Scientist magazine, and I was already writing about these issues, but I was very struck when I heard a woman say that her son, or well, actually she said that a boy had used his saliva and the internet to find an anonymous donor, and as far as she knew, it was the first time it had ever happened. I didn't really believe that. And so I went up and spoke to her, and I asked her how that was possible. So again, this was many years ago. I know it's common now, but it was not common then. She told me, and it was true, that there was a company called Family Tree DNA. The boy, because he was male, had a Y chromosome. The Y chromosome passes largely unchanged from father to son over generations. And like this boy's Y chromosome might have been the same as his great-great-grandfather's. And there's another thing that passes from father to son over generations unchanged typically, and that's a surname. And so Family Tree DNA was able to take that boy's Y chromosome and place the boy into a family tree that had a surname. And with that surname and the date of the donor's birth, which they happened to have, they went through birth records and determined who that donor was. And with another day or two of searching, found the donor, contacted the donor. And the first so-called anonymous donor had been tracked down. And it was, again, although this happens today all the time, at the time, it was an absolute sensation. I was the person who broke that story. And I remember I was interviewed by the BBC. I remember calling for comment for my story. I was calling geneticists and fertility doctors, who had the same first reaction as I did, which is, this is not possible. And then, and everyone agreed in 2005 that really anonymity was over. This was not going to be viable. But all these years later, of course, sperm banks and egg banks are still selling sperm and eggs, claiming and also claiming to the donor themselves that this can be an anonymous process. This particular feature it starts with the story and largely goes over the story of a man who found out, I believe he was 49 years old when he found out through genetic testing that was just completely for fun, that the father who'd raised him was not his genetic father. And it explores what it means to a person to discover that. The things this particular person discovered, were that his father wasn't his genetic father, his sister was not his full sister genetically, that his mother had lied to him his whole life. His father had died when he was quite young, his father who raised him. He found himself lying to genetic relatives that he met through the genetic testing because he wanted to have the opportunity to meet this man and not this donor and not do anything to compromise that. It's a very fraught situation that we have to allow anonymity, and many jurisdictions do not allow it for donor conception. Quebec is about to change its laws. Within a year, it will no longer be legal to have anonymity for donors in Quebec. And I suppose the article, I think you could probably read it and wonder whether it's time for the rest of Canada to reconsider the idea that it's okay to allow donor anonymity to exist. So that's basically what my story is about.
Yeah, it's
welcome any questions.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating read, and now's your time in the audience. If you want to ask a question, please put it in the chat, or signal that you want to ask a question. But I have a question. I'm just, I'm another journalist, right? So I have so many questions. But why should donor conceived people have the right to know who their donor is?
Well, it's interesting. So there are two examples, right? There's two things you could turn to say, what about this? What about adoptees? So in many provinces, including Ontario, it is no longer possible to not tell an adoptee who the birth parents are. And so it was widely acknowledged in some respects. And in many jurisdictions, it's widely acknowledged that you have a right to know, and it's good for you to know. It's healthy for you to know who these people are. And so the identity cannot be kept from you. And this is the case in many European jurisdictions, that it's the sort of same idea. It can't be kept from you. And if you're a donor and you don't want that information shared with a recipient, then don't be a donor, is their approach. But then again, there are other people who say, well, what about, people who have affairs, like lots of people don't know. It's about 5%, right, of people who think they're being raised by one person and are actually being raised by someone, think their genetic father was one person and it's actually someone else. I think that the slight difference here is that this was a purposeful act by a medical establishment, and a parent paid for this. And there there are people who know this about you that you don't know, and it was done deliberately. So you could argue that is a little bit different from that. And I think, another thing that I think is really interesting is how we all felt when we discovered the switched at birth stories. That there's several in Canada, a couple in Manitoba, a couple in Newfoundland, probably many elsewhere, where people find out midlife that they were accidentally switched at birth, and we all have this outpouring of understanding for these people, and I think it's worth thinking about how the parallels are very similar. It's very, very similar feeling for the people who go through it. That this isn't really that I need to know. I need to know who my genetic parents are. A lot of people believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a question from John Ryerson who says, is it because of the medical aspects of the genetics that there should be a right to know, do you think?
I think that a lot of people do feel very strongly that they need to know their medical history. So again, you're going to your doctor and, the doctor says, do you have a family history of, and if you don't know that your donor conceived, you might say no, or you might say yes, and you might be wrong. So there is that, and there are ample lots of examples of how, people who if they'd only known they had a colon cancer history, that they might have done screening that would have saved their lives and have died as a result, or prostate cancer, and there are several examples that have come up over the last few years. But I think it's more than that, actually. I think, although that is the thing that people have the easiest time accepting and understanding, that a person might need their medical genetics, I think that it seems to be the case that, I mean, I don't know this firsthand because I was raised by my genetic parents, but I hear from people, many people, that they want to know. They want to know who the genetic parents are. It doesn't mean they don't love their parents. It doesn't mean that they want those genetic people to be their parents. It's that they want to know who they are and where they came from. And enough people are now saying that it might just be true. It might be the case that we miscalled that.
It's actually a philosophical question, isn't it? It goes to the core of who one is in the world. And that's one of the things I got from your story.
I mean, I have to say, not everyone cares. There are donor conceived people who just don't care, but a lot of them do. A lot of people care deeply. And so for those people, maybe it should be an option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another reminder, if you want to ask a question, now is your moment. But I have another one. One of the other things that I was so struck by in your reporting was just how dramatically sperm donation has changed since the 60s. Like just in a generation, there's just been this fantastic shift in thinking about what that is and how it is accomplished. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that. We only have a couple.
I mean, this is one of my favorite, it's interesting, right? Everyone likes to hear about how this is done. I mean, in the old days, a doctor's office would they would have their own, fresh sperm donation. And so they would recruit people in, maybe in the medical school. Hey, would you like to help out a family for some pocket money? So these men would just, they would get a phone call and they would just show up at the time that the patient was likely to be there and provide a fresh sample. And that would be used to inseminate a woman. And she was hopefully, fertile at that time and would get pregnant, and that would be the end of it. Not many records were kept in those cases. But subsequently, I mean, for all sorts of reasons, including, medical safety and infectious disease and so on, it became much more regulated to the point where now, a man has to be screened. It's actually quite an arduous process. He has to go through this screening and he has to be tested for all kinds of not only sexually transmitted diseases, but other infectious diseases and genetic diseases. And his sperm is actually collected and quarantined for 6 months. And then he's tested again at the other end of the 6 months. And if he's tests with no problems at both ends, then the sperm can be released. And these men, so because of all this testing, you don't give a donation once. You sign on for a year or more, and it's a bank now usually. And so it is then ordered from a catalog, and so it's quite a different operation. And eggs are similar. It used to be fresh, and now it's much more likely to be in a bank in a little, 3 eggs per straw, and they're sold for very high prices. Both of those things are sold at very high prices.
Really? How much would it cost?
So what I hear is that a vial of sperm, which by the way is not the whole donation, is a donation often split into 5 separate parts, could go $1,000 to $2,000. And the eggs, I think that right now you're talking 15 to 18,000 for 6. And then, you might be able to buy 1, you might be able to buy 3, but 6 seems to be what a lot of people are buying. And it's a lot of money.
It really is. Yeah.
And the donors in this country cannot be paid.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, thanks so much. This has just been a real, it's just been such an eye-opening experience just to hear all of this information tonight, but also in the article that you wrote. It's just a superb article, by the way. I highly recommend reading this. So thank you very much, Alison. We are going to go to our third and final guest tonight. Her name is Michelle Harding. Hello, Michelle. Thanks for being here tonight. Michelle is a fundraising expert whose new book, which is called The Definitive Guide to Faith-Based Fund Development, helps faith communities raise money. And we are absolutely all ears on this one, Michelle. So I wonder if you could let us know what your book is about.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. Traditionally people don't like to talk about money in the church, so I'm always excited when I get to talk about money in the church in the same environment. So this book is actually based on 2 of the 3 books that my father, Ben Harder, wrote, and on my own experience doing capital campaigns for churches and working in the nonprofit sector. So I realized early on in my career that churches could implement a lot of the best practices of nonprofit fundraising and that it would increase their revenue. So when a publisher approached me a few years ago, well, actually about 5 years ago now, and asked me to rewrite and update my dad's books, I happily said yes. So one of the questions I am most often asked is, what is the difference between church fundraising and secular fundraising? And the answer is actually not much, because there is one important difference between church fundraising and secular fundraising, though, and that is people's motivations for giving. In secular mainstream fundraising, the ask for support is embedded in emotion and designed specifically to evoke an emotional response to help. Christian giving, on the other hand, is not motivated by an emotional response, but rather is based on Christian character. And one of my favorite sayings that my father would always say is, even if the church didn't need a dime, as Christians, we need to give. And I think that's something really, really important to remember. So for Christians, the motivation to give is deeply rooted in our faith. Many of us have been taught to give and to be good stewards with what we have received from God. This understanding of faith-based giving is part of who we are as Christians and disciples of God. And just as a side note, North American philanthropy, and probably a lot of European philanthropy, was in fact built on faith-based giving and Christian giving. And sadly, in the last few generations, this is decreasing with each generation. So that's one challenge we all face, not just churches, but also the nonprofit sector. But I heard I heard my father repeatedly say a few things about stewardship in the church. The first was that we have taken stewardship education off of the formal agenda of the church. And the second is that we have raised our first, if not second generation without a Christian memory. And he felt, and I feel, that both of these things have negatively impacted church finances over the past few decades. So because we've taken stewardship teaching off of the agenda of our churches, many Christians today do not have a good understanding of why they need to give as Christians and know very little about Christian giving. So in addition, when churches do talk about money, it's often in the context of crisis. You get the fall speech, we're not going to make budget in the fall, which is really sort of just a poorly positioned fall campaign, or some other financial crisis like the boiler blew or the roof is leaking and we need funds to fix it. And we make that appeal for funds in crisis. So there's often very little proactive planning, and many church leaders don't talk enough about money and giving positively and holistically in relation to Scripture and our faith on a regular basis in our worship services and in our everyday conversations. So this book is really about applying and using fundraising best practices from the nonprofit sector in the church, but framed in the principles of Christian giving and discipleship. Most churches need and want to do more when it comes to revenue generation, but really many do not know where to start. So this book is designed to be a how-to guide. It is expansive and comprehensive. It is large. we're not gonna try and candy coat that. It's a big book. I've heard people call it an encyclopedia. But it's not an all or nothing situation. So certainly some strategies build on others, but you can start or implement whichever strategy will suit your congregation the best. And I just, before I end, want to kind of leave you with a few stats on giving and just to kind of give you something to think about. So the number one reason people do not give is because nobody asked them to. And that sounds hard to believe, but it's a fact. And the number one reason people will give again and make a second gift is because they received a timely and genuine thank you. And those are really two important principles in all of fundraising. You have to ask and you have to thank people. Church statistics, and these actually follow a lot in nonprofit as well, but probably 10 to 20% of your congregation are giving about 80 to 90% of the donated funds or the revenue of your church. And a 60-40 or even a 70-30 ratio would indicate a more financially healthy congregation. And on average, 15 to 20% of the congregation, of most congregations, are giving nothing. So small changes can often make a really big difference. And the three things that I would say you need to do at a minimum to accomplish any sort of stewardship program being successful in the church is to set a standard of giving. Make sure you tell people what you want them to give. Create a positive giving environment with lots of giving options and ways to give. And to educate new members and people in your church what it is that you're asking them for and what you expect of them. And really, I could probably lecture you for hours on fundraising in the church, but I will stop there and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. I think your video's clicking out a bit. Can you hear me, Michelle? Michelle,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, are you
I
still?
can, yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Your video was coming out. We have a couple of questions. I'm sure all of us have many
Yes.
for you. So John Ryerson says, at my church, we now use January to have speakers from
Yes.
partners to tell us what they did with the money and of course to say thank you, which I mean,
Okay.
Is
All
that
right.
strategy? Michelle? I think we've lost her.
Yes, and that's really, I don't know what's happening.
There's a lag. There's a bit of
Are
a
you
lag.
there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Am I here?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Maybe I'll turn my video off and that will give me better audio.
Okay.
Okay. Is that working better? Is that better? Maybe I'm not taking up enough bandwidth. Yes, so that is actually a really big thing, John. And I've seen a lot of churches kind of switch over to doing that and having people come up and say, this is the result of the donations that you're giving. And this is what we're doing in our congregation. And this is what we're doing in the youth group. And you can do that. You can focus on one program each Sunday and kind of run it for a series, like it sounds like maybe you do in January. You can do it throughout the year. But that is really a crucial part of fundraising, particularly today. People want to know the impact of their dollars. And, really physiologically, I was saying, the reason that secular fundraising is sort of built on emotions is that there is an emotional response that you get from giving and helping somebody else. So that is really powerful. And that's why people, they like to give the $5 to the homeless person on the street because you sort of get an immediate boost in your brain, right? And, you know, and again, so that giving again, you know, when you're sharing that impact and thanking people, and, you know, we always say you make the donors feel like a hero. You know, that pendulum maybe swung a little too hard, as it always does. Every pendulum does, right? And we're sort of bringing it back, and well, let's not have mission drift, and let's make sure we stay focused on, you know, what we're doing. But really, thanking your donors is a huge piece of fundraising, and again, showing that impact. So it's good that you do that. Everyone should do that.
And this is John's again. John says Obama proved that every time you ask, you get donations. This counters pushback that we in the church ask too often. Do you think that's right?
Well, it is, you know, and it's ironic. I get that a lot, you know, when you do capital campaigns, and I don't mean to kind of chuckle, but people will say, well, we can't ask our volunteers and we can't ask our existing donors. And I kind of shake my head and I'm like, well, these are the people that are the most tied into you and the most loyal to you. Absolutely. This is the first group we need to ask. Like, and I kind of think, who are you going to ask if you're not going to ask the people that are closest to you? But you're right. They feel like, you know, donor fatigue is what it's called. And people feel like, I can't keep asking. I can't keep asking. Well, you're right. I mean, you can't call somebody every single month and ask for a major gift or ask for something. But, you know, this is where you have to be kind of strategic about it. And, you know, the church is very lucky. They have a lot of monthly donors. I mean, most nonprofits would be very jealous of monthly, the amount of monthly donors that the church has, right? So you're lucky, the church is lucky in that regard, but I think there's still the other side of it where younger generations, new people coming to the church, they're just not really being educated as to the, you know, the biblical principles of Christian stewardship. And I think that's, you know, in the article, that's one thing that kind of, I guess, really popped out more than anything, is inspiring people to want to give, and that showing that impact, and, you know, asking and really taking it back to scripture. I mean, you know, like that saying, it's not just a saying, you know, like even if the church didn't need the money, we as Christians need to give. And yeah, we do. We just need to give. And I think that a lot of people don't really fully understand that the way that they should.
Right.
Or that they need to, right? I mean, if everybody in the church tithed and gave offerings and alms on top of that, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation about the church needing money, right? Because they'd have far more money than they would ever need.
Right. So there's some things that churches are doing right then, do you think?
Yes. And I think, I'm going to try and come back online here. I think that a lot of churches are actually doing a lot of things really right. And, you know, I like to believe that we can always be better, right? So I think that this book, there's always something, if you've got a good annual fund program and your church is financially healthy, well, grab the book and see if you could get a legacy giving program going. You know, that's another area I think that is uncomfortable for nonprofits and not just churches, is to talk to people about those legacy gifts and the impact that a legacy gift can have on a church. I'll tell you a quick story, but there's a lady years ago that I did a capital campaign with a church here in Windsor. She walked to church, elderly lady, walked to church, sat in the back row, dropped $25 in the offering plate every Sunday. And when she passed away, she left $1 million to the church, and nobody had any idea, like, that she, you know, was that connected to the church, or that she had that kind of money to give. And, you know, I think that's quite indicative of a lot of congregations, right? They just don't know the people that are sitting in their pews and don't know, you know, haven't spoken to them about things like that. So I believe that legacy giving is an opportunity for almost every congregation.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so much. It's just wonderful to hear from you. And with that, we're gonna go to the next section of our reading club tonight. And this is the moment that many of us been waiting for. It's a ta-da moment. Our publisher, Jocelyn Bell, is going to take the floor now.
Thanks, Alanna. So I am going to be presenting the winners of our first ever Christmas sermon contest. And but before I do that, I just first of all want to give a really heartfelt thank you to all of the contestants. All of your sermons enriched and inspired us and brought us closer to the heart of the Christmas message. So thank you to everybody who submitted sermons. They were just truly wonderful. I also want to give a sincere gratitude to our esteemed judges. These are just amazing three people who agreed to judge our contest. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about them. Wing Yi Wong is one of Hong Kong's first female homileticians and a PhD candidate at Emmanuel College at the University of Toronto. She's in the process of being ordained a United Church minister and holds a master's in preaching from Princeton Theological Seminary. Wing Yi has over 10 years experience in intercultural preaching, teaching, and ministry in both Hong Kong and Canada. Our second judge is Reverend Ross Bartlett, and he's a United Church minister and adjunct professor at the Atlantic School of Theology in Halifax. He holds Doctor of Theology and Doctor of Ministry degrees and has been involved in training lay leaders and ministry students for more than 2 decades. He's the author of several books, and for 15 years, he was the preaching columnist for Gathering magazine. And our third judge is Reverend Joni Sankin. She is an ordained Mennonite minister who is the new Butler Chair of Homiletics and Biblical Interpretation at the Vancouver School of Theology. She was previously professor of homiletics at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. And she has written several books about preaching, including her most recent, which is called Getting to God, Preaching Good News in a Troubled World. So as homileticians and preaching experts, these three esteemed judges celebrated Christmas in July by reading all 29 entries over the summer months and providing thoughtful, discerning evaluations. As Joni Sankin said, she was drawn to the sermons that, and I quote, told the truth about the human experience and challenging situations in our world alongside the difference that Jesus makes for real people. After all, the world that God loves is this one, where we are, not a cleaned up, shiny Hallmark card. So well said, Joni. So without further ado, in third place, we have a sermon that starts with a relatable childhood memory and gradually explores the depth of the Christmas message, asking listeners to imagine how they'd feel if an angel said, "Do not fear." One judge noted that the sermon writer eloquently and compassionately employs the image of the infant Jesus as the first step in God's campaign to redeem the world and heal its inhabitants, inviting listeners to take their part. Congratulations to Reverend Ryan Slifka, coordinating minister of St. George's United in Courtenay, British Columbia. In second place, we have a sermon that acknowledges the frustrations and anger many feel on Christmas Eve, skillfully transitioning into a message of hope. One judge commented that the sermon writer gives the community space to acknowledge their negative feelings about the holiday season, but then champions hope as the true miracle of Christmas in a way that redeems the things we hate. So our second place winner is Patty Rogers, who is a lay minister at Bond Head United in Bradford, Ontario. Congratulations, Patty. And in first place, the sermon is going to be published in Broadview's December 2024 issue and featured on its cover. This winning sermon writer urges us to see the face of Christ in every person and to embody the transformative power of God's love through acts of kindness and hospitality. One judge said, "Truly, this is a remarkable and inspiring message for the Christmas season." So the winner of the Best Christmas Sermon Contest is Reverend Jason Myers of Metropolitan United Church in Toronto. Congratulations, Jason. I think Jason is here. I believe I saw his name. Can I call out Jason if he's there to?
I'm here,
There you
Jocelyn.
are.
Thanks so much. What a treat this is. So thank you to you and Broadview and all the judges. What a surprise and a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. There you are. Do you have any other thoughts? Well, now we've got you on the spotlight.
Oh, well, I mean, it as you'll see when it's published, it starts with I saw Christ today, and it 3 little vignettes, and the first one actually happened. I was inspired to write the sermon after seeing a woman in a purple hat load meals out of her minivan in St. Jamestown in Toronto, leading up to Christmas. And it was a quintessential Christ-like act. And it was what inspired that message.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a beautiful sermon. We were all moved, some of us to tears as we read it. And we've got a beautiful illustration for the cover and for the inside pages. And so we'll be talking to you a little bit more about some details, but congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So all three, we're hoping all three of our top winners will be posted online. As I mentioned, Jason's will be in print and online. And so please do give them a read. It's going to be a few more weeks or months before they're available, but we will get them out in the public, and we're very excited to do so. As we conclude this evening's celebration, I'd like to remind everyone that Broadview is more than just a magazine. It's also a charitable organization, and we're committed to fostering thoughtful dialogue, inspiring positive change, and shining a light on stories that matter. Our mission is to engage readers in exploring justice, faith, and ethical living, and to do so, we rely on the generous support of people like you. So if you've been moved by the celebration of sermon writing or by all of the events of this evening and all of our speakers, please consider making a donation to Broadview. Your tax-deductible gift will help us to continue to provide a platform for voices like Jason's and Patty's and Ryan's, as well as Alison's and Judy's and Michelle's, and to bring meaningful faith-driven content to readers across Canada and beyond. So this brings us to the official end of our evening together. We hope to see you at our next National Online Reading Club. We normally hold these events on the first Monday of the month, but due to a scheduling conflict, next month's event will be on Tuesday, October 8th at 7 p.m. rather than the 7th. If you'd like to stay for a few minutes of informal conversation, you're welcome to do so. But if you need to be on your way this evening, then thank you for joining us. And congratulations once again to our winners and all of our contestants. Good night to those who are leaving, and I'm going to stick around for a little while to chat some more. Alanna, I'm throwing it back to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Throwing it back to me? Wait a second.
Yeah.
Wasn't that great? Yeah, we had so many amazing sermons come in. It was such an inspiration, wasn't it, to just get all of those words of wisdom and to just be able to read through them and really savor them. I think each one in its own way was kind of remarkable. I read them all, as I'm sure you did, and not that we judged them, but it was but they were really a wealth of. It really reminded me how much vigor and how much art and how much craft there is among the people who deliver sermons to us each week. It was really an inspiration. So yeah, thank you for that. Anybody have any questions they'd like to lob at anyone here? I noticed that Michelle and Alison are still here.
I have a question for Michelle, actually. I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, I've got a cough. I often wonder about, with fundraising, sometimes that there's incentives for giving. Like if you give us $100, you're going to get a tote bag and things like that. Or you're going to get this, I don't know, package of return address stickers. They're always useful. Is there a difference between secular and church givers on those little incentive gifts?
Yeah, and actually they're not as popular with donors as you probably would think. Okay. They're mostly used like in events when it comes to event fundraising and that kind of thing. If you raise $100, you get a $10 t-shirt kind of thing. But there's been studies done on that, and after, like, once you kind of pass a certain point in value, they actually lose their value to the donor, and donors think, well, they're spending too much. And but I mean, a lot of fundraising, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but I don't want to be someone that gets stuck in the mud and left behind, but like fundraising is becoming sort of transactional for a lot of organizations now, right? And you know, where exactly, you know, like you're going to get something for giving. And I don't encourage people to do that because it's a bit of a slippery slope. I mean, generosity, giving isn't, I don't believe giving should be involved with getting. So there is some value to that, and it will work, like I said, in certain event situations and that, but overall, I don't agree with it. So
Okay.
like you get them, there's a lot of direct mail programs will still send you like the cards that you can give away and that, but honestly, and like they're sort of designed to make you feel guilty that now you've gotten this gift, now you have to give back. And that's, again, like it's about the motivation of giving. And you know, a lot of those just go straight in the garbage for a lot of people. So it's kind of a, you know, it can be a waste of money too. But the bigger organizations, like you'll see, like they use those. Larger organizations tend to use those fundraising tactics.
I would say,
I'm laughing at Jason or John's note. John, we can have coffee anytime. You don't.
John Ryerson says, I want my gift to go to a charitable cause. However, there are other incentives like coffee with Jocelyn.
Yeah, we'll just do
Yes,
that.
and
Don't worry.
and that's absolutely true. Like honestly, a donor would rather sit down with a knowledgeable board member or with the executive director, give me some insights to where you're going. Like, what do you need help with? What programs do you want to do that you can't fund because you don't have the money to do them? I mean, these are donors want to help. They want to solve a problem. They want to make a difference. They want to have an impact. They don't want a pen with the church's name on it because they made a $25 donation. They want to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
That makes
I
sense.
was wondering, Michelle, just since we're still on this topic,
Yeah.
when you were talking about the emotional reaction that people have when they give, and you were talking about nonprofit organizations, and how people, you know, like you're helping because they're, you know, people lost their home in a fire, or you know, whatever it is that you're giving to.
Yep.
How do you encourage? How do you figure that out if you're in a church? I mean, what are the motivations that are emotional in a church for people to give, or say at a magazine?
Well, I mean, like teen camps, right? Like kids, youth are always a big emotional draw across the board for everybody. Like it depends on, you know, it depends on your programming. Like if you had, if you were helping people with going through divorce or going through some sort of tragedy, like that is a big emotional draw. But like, I mean, in church congregations, I think it's really, you have to kind of tie it back to just giving as part of discipleship, right? I did like Jocelyn's pitch. I think I might become a donor for Broadview, so I'll try my best for that. And you know what? I appreciate that you were doing that. I honestly was like, wow, look at her go, you go, ask, because you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. And truthfully, people are just afraid to ask. And I mean, I think you could look at just about any congregation, and I mean, you're helping somebody in some way. Even if you've got a food kitchen, you've got a cooking program for new immigrants. Those have been sort of popular in urban churches. You know, helping people to cook the food that they have access to here, right? Because if they've come, we've got different food than where they came from. So there's all kinds of, it's just really a matter of, you know, how you're positioning it. And, you know, what people want to know is, this person started here, and because of my donation and everybody else's donation, they now moved to a better spot and they are better off, right? So at any point that you can sort of say, this is where the person started and this is where they are now, that matters, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve people's lives. We're trying to improve, you know, whatever the situation is. I mean, we're not donating money to make situations worse. We're trying to improve the situation. So reporting back to people and saying, this is how we are impacting the lives of youth in our congregation. And actually, I am very passionate about youth, so I will just put this plug in there. I recently read a study that churches, kids who attend youth group are more likely to go into church leadership. So considering the decline and the shortage that we have of church leaders, like every church should be focusing in their youth group, right? Because if that is one of the biggest determinants to bringing people back into the ministry, like churches shouldn't be overlooking that, right? That's an important piece of it.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Sometimes I go off on tangents. So.
That's really great. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question for? I notice Alison is still here, and of course Michelle's here. Judy's still here. Does anybody have who's left in our audience have another question for one of our other guests? No.
I do, but I don't want to jump in again because it's.
Thank you.
I just wanted to get some insight from Alison. I've been hearing a bit about how some of the Christian right, I guess, in the U.S. is opposing IVF now, and I went through IVF. I wrote about that for what we were then the Observer. Wrote about that experience, so it's not a secret in my life, and my son does know that's how he was conceived. But I'm just wondering if you can just tell us a little bit what that is about. Why go after IVF? What's the rationale, and how big of a threat is it for future IVF?
Well, I mean, so the part I've been following is the concern over embryos, right? The concern that that a lot of people in certain states, embryos now have personhood. And so this is a concern for people trying to freeze those and possibly discard them at some point. So I think there's a lot of concern about that question. People even are being motivated to move their embryos from one state to another and maybe do their IVF in another state. I mean, IVF has been, there have been opponents to IVF since the beginning, because it is technically, creating, you could argue that it's creating life. And I think that is a very controversial, it's the same question really, right? The new facet, I think, is the Alabama case that started the question of where they will decide personhood. I mean, where does it begin? And I'm really curious to see whether this is going to also lead to an increase in egg freezing as opposed to embryo creation, because egg freezing came about it was developed in Italy, where you could not at that time could not freeze embryos. You could not retain embryos. They had to be used or discarded immediately. And so this, eggs are not considered persons. And so this might lead to increased egg freezing, which isn't necessarily a good medical choice. Yeah, I mean, it's a very fluid situation right now in the US. And I think a lot of people are pretty upset about it.
Yeah. Thanks.
But while I'm here, I had a question for Judy. Sorry. I guess when I was listening to your talk, I was also thinking about your other daughter, and I'm wondering if you would be willing to say a few words about how this has affected her.
You're muted.
She was only 11 when Lindsay disappeared, so her memories of the early days are, not the same as mine, but it's part of her life. She's, we were packing up to go on a boat trip with her and her son and husband, and we got a call that the police were doing something. So we all pulled back, or she's watched me, it's part of her life as well and part of her reality. And she's gone through many of probably the same things that I've gone through. So it's difficult for her as well. Now she hasn't got a sister or nieces. So yeah, the siblings in any of the support groups I've been in, the siblings are sort of as well, just as affected and have different but very similar issues, I would say. Yeah, it's tough. And now she's 42. And I have a grandson, yeah.
Sorry. Somebody's bleeding in here. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay.
John Ryerson has sent you a note saying thank you for sharing your story, Judy.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, tough one.
I think one of the things that I wanted to raise awareness also is that the database actually exists. So if people know anybody that's missing, to contact their police and make sure that their DNA or some family DNA gets entered, because you just never know. And it's been highly successful. And the more profiles that are in, it's exponentially more success. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to wind it up. It's been a great event. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. We really appreciate it. It's great to get the group back together. So until next month, thank you very much. Bye.